All right, is everyone out there? Just wondering if you can hear me. Say hello. Tell me that you can hear me. Can you see our infinity screen? Oh. Looks like we got Naya, Steven, Sebastian, Tamara. All right, how's everyone doing? Tell me if you can hear me. Sound is great. Awesome. Thank you very much, Amy. Okay. Hi, Antonio. All right. Sweet. Thank you so much for yesterday, guys. Thank you so much for being understanding about that. It looks like we're in business here. Knock on wood. And hopefully this is a topic that you'll be interested in. This will be helpful to you. Just remember, as we're people are showing up here, follow us on YouTube. We're going to start posting these videos there, and also join the Facebook group. We have a Facebook group for this and for a lot of the other courses. So make sure to connect up with those things. If you have a question, you're welcome to ask a question kind of just in this stream here, but you can also ask a question in the Ask a Question section. And one of the things that does is it will kind of anchor that so that you can go directly to my answer to that question. I'm going to try to make a point of coming back to the questions and answers and answering right there. Answering there, and then I guess if I press that button and then I stop it, it will actually kind of tag that answer so that you can go back to it later. All right, it looks like we're getting some more people in here. And I do have a question for you guys because we are getting into poetry here. I always find it interesting to see, how do you like poetry? I put it in the questions and answers. If you want to try to answer that over there, ask a question or questions and answers, not sure what it looks like on your side, give that a try. And I'm just curious to see, what do you think about poetry? How do you like poetry? 0 to 5 stars. Where are you at with that question? Okay. Hello, Isabella, Paulina, Victoria, Sebastian. All right. All right, it looks like, I don't know if we have any answers to this. Okay, well, again, do try to follow us, connected up with us, and I'm going to just get going here. We're about 3 minutes in, and be useful to you. I really, as I mentioned last, I really want to give you guys a lot of things about the test, as unromantic as that is, and you're reading a lot of books, having hopefully a lot of good discussion in your classes. I'm just going to kind of hopefully play a supporting role there and then give you some things that are really directly related to the test. So you get very familiar with it and you have some methods that you can use that are really targeted toward that. Okay, but in the process, hopefully appreciate poetry. I got a 4 in here. So you have appreciation for poetry, breaking it down for students, appreciate the elements. So I really like poetry. I think I'm up in the 5 range personally, but I do know that there's a lot of people who are just, not feeling poetry for some reason. Okay, Sebastian too. So this is great. I think we're off to a good start then. I'll come back and check that here in a second. All right, I'm going to switch over to my presentation. And I actually am just going to stop really quick and just, do you see my presentation? Say yes, someone tell me yes, and then I'm going to go back over there. I don't want to do like a whole 5 minutes or something and then realize you guys haven't seen any of this. Let me come back. Do you guys see my presentation? Yes, yes, yes. Okay, awesome. Going back over the presentation. We're doing the AP Lit Poetry Prompt, which is the first of the free response questions that you will encounter on the AP exam when you go back and to do the essay section of the exam. And we're going to talk about the one poem prompt in particular today. And by the way, my name's Arthur Carabelli. And I just want to remind you every time pretty much what the exam is like. So, 8 o'clock in the morning or whatever it is, you show up and you will have a multiple choice section. You will have 1 hour in that room and you have 55 multiple choice questions. One half of those are going to be prose, like excerpts from novels or short stories. One half is going to be poetry. One half is going to be older. One half is going to be modern. And hopefully over the course of this year, we'll touch on each of those types and get some, some specific approaches that we can use for each of those. Then you'll take a 10-minute break. You'll go out in the hallway and then you'll come back for the essay section, which is 2 hours. And you have 3 essay questions, and doing the math for that, it's about 40 minutes per essay question or prompt. And you have to time yourself. There should be a clock in the room, but they aren't going to tell you should be getting done with question number 1. You have to kind of pace yourself and realize that you should be spending 40 minutes on each of those, basically. Question number 1, again, is the poetry prompt, which we're going to be talking about today. It can be the one poem prompt, and it does seem like it is the one poem prompt mainly. In the early 2000s, there were 2 poem prompts, and we will touch on that. It's not that much different in terms of the way it's developed, but it does have a comparison or contrast aspect to that essay. So we'll talk about that without getting too distracted by it, because there's actually some talk that it may have been retired, although they have not officially said that. Question 2 is the prose prompt, okay, where again, they're going to take a section from a novel or a short story, and they'll want you to analyze that and write an essay about that. And then finally, we actually dealt with this a little bit last week when we talked about getting the most out of your novels and plays. Why are we doing that? Why are we taking detailed notes on our novels and plays? Because the open prompt is a broad thematic question where they're going to ask you, just some random thing, and they want you to select a work of literature that you can use to answer that question. Okay, so that's why we're reading in these AP classes and not just doing all test prep. Okay, I do want to talk about the poetry and prose prompts together. I want you to start thinking about those as being kind of one and the same, as having a lot of commonalities, because I think it'll stick better in your brain as we move on to the prose prompt a little bit later on, probably this fall into winter. They really are pretty much the same. Okay, so I want to give you poetry prompt in a nutshell. Again, I did share this last week, but I don't think it hurts to repeat. The question is, how do poets use poetic techniques to convey meaning? And there are some synonyms that they use for this that you will see in some of the prompts. Some of the different things they'll say is poetic devices, or formal elements, or elements such as, and then they will list off 3 elements. You don't have to use those elements. I want to emphasize that, but you can know for sure that they are present. So you could use them. How does the poet use poetic techniques? Okay, different words for convey, basically support or parallel, contribute to, develop, communicate, and then meaning. What are we looking? Could be the meaning. It could be a message, kind of a message about life or human nature. Complex response. So, I'm dealing with something and I'm having, not just like I'm mad, but I actually have a complex response. I have, something beyond just kind of a one simple response. Attitudes toward a theme, states of mind, perceptions, emotions, views. Is that it? Relationship between. Okay. So basically, it's just saying that a poet doesn't just throw in some alliteration for good measure, or, get it to rhyme so that it sounds good. Or, Emily Dickinson does some slant rhyme and it's just, oh, that's annoying. Why is she doing that? Well, usually the poetic techniques are meant to convey something about the meaning. And hopefully when we look at this poem today, you're going to gain some appreciation for that. So if you haven't opened up the poem and ideally printed it off, that would be great. Do that. Okay. I want to also remind you about the prose prompt. Prose prompt is pretty much the same thing. How do authors use literary techniques to convey meaning? And this is a lot of overlap here. So literary techniques, narrative techniques, devices such as, again, list off some devices. Don't need to use them, but you definitely can. Convey, lots of different words for that, again, that you will see. And then finally, what are some of the meanings? A little bit different meanings that they'll look for. Development of character, personality traits, attitude, experience, relationship to others, relationship to surroundings, social commentary, a lot more. So lots of different things you can point to there. But again, the point being that authors don't just, throw in a little bit of imagery there or throw in a metaphor. They probably are doing that pretty much on purpose to convey something about the deeper meaning of the text. So we are going to talk about The Whipping. It is one of my favorite poems to teach because I think it really gives us a good place to start with this. It's by Robert Hayden, and I am from Michigan. He is a Detroit poet. He came from a pretty rough neighborhood, Paradise Valley in Detroit, and he taught at the University of Michigan. If you haven't yet, there is a shortened URL that you can go to and get that. Okay. So I'm going to flip back over just to make sure everyone is with me. Okay. How are we doing over here? Do we have anyone else to answer this? Looks like just still Sebastian and Amy. Okay. And it sounds like sound is great. Everything okay? Any questions, any concerns? We ready to go ahead? Okay, I'm going to head on back. Okay. So I'm going to recommend that you also get this How to Read a Poem. This is case sensitive again. So if you want to see if you can bring this up on your phone or, on another tab, How to Read a Poem. And this is developed from Jim Burke. He has a book called The English Teacher's Companion. I just feel like this is a really good way to approach a poem. We are not trying to torture a confession out of a poem. We're trying to appreciate different facets of a poem, kind of trying to hold it up to the light and appreciate what we can about it. These coding symbols are meant for you to use to annotate the poem while you're reading, jotting down relevant symbols and a short response in the margins of your poem. So read through the poem and then go through these readings. And I'm actually going to ask you to do this a little bit, and we'll try to have a little bit back and forth about this. So the first one is enjoyment. And that seems like, why, do I like this poem or do I not like this poem? But I want to see if you can pinpoint what are those moments where you're really enjoying the poem, and that would be a heart. And what are those moments where you really are not enjoying the poem? I mentioned this about Emily Dickinson when she uses some slant rhyme. I'm just like, this is not enjoyable. This does not flow. But the reason that's good is because your knee-jerk reaction may be pointing to something deeper, some feature of the poem that you're actually picking up on that is intentional on the part of the poet. Emily Dickinson, many other poets are not interested in making you necessarily feel good. They are trying to convey some intensity of experience, and that could be good, but actually quite often it is bad. Some of the emotions that are being expressed are difficult emotions. And so, the fact that you don't enjoy a certain point may actually be a very good insight. And I want you to kind of think about, as you read this poem, and I'm going to give you a second in a couple minutes here to read it for enjoyment. Next thing is meaning. And meaning is a lot of things. First of all, you should definitely know the definitions of all the words that are involved. Look those up if you need to. You can do an educated guess or a paraphrase. You can look for figurative language is another kind of meaning. So we're going to get more into that, but you probably know some of the figurative language, simile, metaphor. I would class allusion in there. We're going to hear a little bit about metonymy and apostrophe and synecdoche. We'll get into some other types of figurative language. We won't be too fancy today, but that's another type of meaning, and it's definitely worth looking at there. Irony, I think, I'd also class that in there because that's usually the opposite. I mean, if we're talking about verbal irony, It's kind of the opposite meaning of what is expressed. Next thing is structure and language. And I think that is really, especially structure. I really like looking at structure. For any of you, how many of you are like kind of more math, sciencey type people? This is very objective, and you get a chance to really look at the features of the poem and what is its structure. So structure involves things like the shape of the poem on the page, line lengths, stanza lengths. Is there a rhyme scheme? Repetition is an aspect of structure, and any variations in these as time goes on. Syntax. What kind of sentences are we using? Short, pithy sentences or long, run-on sentences, awkward sentences, kind of convoluted syntax. What are we seeing in the poem? And it's a really good thing to look at and notice, is that supporting meaning? Language refers to what kind of words are we using? Is the poet's language formal or informal, stuffy, down to earth? Does the poet use slang or foreign words? And do these choices change over the course of the poem? Okay, and then again, do any of these things convey meaning? So I use a little word bubble for the language. One other thing that you can use for this is point of view. I kind of like using point of view for this. So is it in the first person? Is it in the third person? Sometimes even second person. And then there are different types of third person, objective, limited, omniscient, and we can kind of pay attention to that as well. Pay attention to the mood and tone. I want to give you a quick differentiation between mood and tone. First of all, choose the best emoji. Are you picking up on any mood that's happening in the poem? Look for words and phrases that express emotion. What mood does the poet create and how does it affect you? Consider how the poet creates this mood, and actually you look at the previous 3 bullet points, a lot of times will be one of the ways it does that. Does this change over the course of the poem? Tone. A little bit different. I've been using notes for this. Sometimes I use like a little speaker icon for this, whatever you feel is easier to do. Tone is different because you could be angry in a kind of a hot way, you know, like a very passionate way. You could also be angry in a cool way. There's a whole list of tone words. If you go, there's actually a clickable link that will take you. This is on the How to Read a Poem page that you can go to a big list of tone words, you know, sarcastic, ironic, solemn, lots of different good words that you can use there. Not the emotion, but the way that that emotion is expressed. And then finally, I recommend, even if you don't do a full-fledged timed writing on this, I would do a conclusion and see if you can make that connection. How does the poet use any of these things to convey meaning? Okay, let me come back over and just make sure you guys are okay. Good to go. Everything is looking okay over here. Y'all with me? People still over here? Going back over. All right, so let's do this. What I would like you to do, if you can manage this, ideally you had a chance to print this out. If not, you can kind of watch me go through this process. But I would like you to start out with, let me go over to, here's the How to Read a Poem, by the way, and I posted that for you to get, and there's all the things that you can think about. I actually, the second page of this has some good questions from a book called Preen, Sun, and Sense. Extra questions that you can kind of ask yourself. We're not really going to go over those right now. But here's the whipping. And I want you to actually spend a minute here going over this. I'm going to read it, actually. I'll read it out loud to you guys because I think we should never not read a poem out loud, even if you're just doing it under your breath. Let's look at the prompt together. And if you do have a printout of this, I'd like you to underline with me. Read the following poem carefully, then write a well-organized essay in which you analyze how Hayden uses, and here's our elements such as structure, imagery, and point of view. That is our poetic techniques. That's the part of it that they're asking about. They gave us some three options there that we can look at. And we don't need to use those, but we can. And then what is the meaning that they're looking for here? They're looking for the complex response of the speaker as he witnesses the whipping. Okay, and I double underline that. That is the meaning. And basically, I need to show how this stuff supports this meaning. Okay? And so I don't just say, oh, there's some alliteration in this. I have to say the alliteration actually supports or helps us to understand the complex response of the speaker. Okay, if as I do this, why don't you go over to the, the chat room and maybe say, what did you like? What did you not like? And if you can kind of target that, tell me a line number where you felt like, oh, that's really nice, or boy, I really don't like this part and see if you can tell me what the reason is, okay? So I'm going to try to do my best job reading this. The Whipping by Robert Hayden. The old woman across the way is whipping the boy again and shouting to the neighborhood her goodness and his wrongs. Wildly, he crashes through elephant ears, pleads in dusty zinnias, while she, in spite of crippling fat, pursues and corners him. She strikes and strikes the shrilly circling boy till the stick breaks in her hand. His tears are rainy weather to wound like memories. My head, gripped in bony vise of knees, the writhing struggle to wrench free the blows, the fear worse than blows that hateful words could bring, the face that I no longer knew or loved. Well, it is over now. It is over. And the boy sobs in his room. And the woman leans, muttering against a tree, exhausted, purged, avenged in part for lifelong hidings she has had to bear. Okay, so take about 30 seconds, and if you can, go over to the chat room part of this and tell me a part that you like or dislike. If you can give me a line number, that would be extra good. This is just kind of a knee-jerk reaction to what we're seeing here. Okay. Valentina, I like the first two lines, thought it gave the poem a strong start. Okay. Definitely. Any reason why you feel like it gives it a strong start, Valentina? And anyone else want to chime in with what did you like or not like about this? Okay, crickets. All right, I'm going to go ahead. Oh, here we go, Amy. The imagery and action of what the speaker witnessed, and you're saying that's something you kind of like, even though it's not, obviously not a good thing. I like what Valentina's saying here. It starts right in the climax, hooking the reader. Definitely a good writing method. Okay, great. So we appreciate. I'm going to go back over to the poem and just share with you a couple things that I like about it. I mean, we could definitely right here, jumps right in. And I put the, the heart, to indicate that's something that I like. Hopefully you can see this okay. If I come back and it's like not showing up on the video, let me know. And then also we have a lot of good imagery, I think, is what Amy was saying. We have a lot of real, precise, vivid imagery, which we generally like in poetry. One other thing that I would say is this is kind of smooth sounding. I want you to kind of get away from it flows, because I want to actually see if we can account for that. I actually think one of the reasons I like this is it has consistent construction. I'll tell you what I mean by that. Another way of saying that is parallel construction. This is a really nice balanced sentence. The old woman across the way is whipping. We got an ing verb, the boy again, and shouting. We got another ing verb again. We got her goodness and his wrongs. It is an extremely balanced and consistently constructed sentence. So as a nice consistent construction to it, actually, this may be something that I come back to as a structural related thing. Definitely worth looking at. I'm going to go a little bit further down. Let me actually say that at a certain point, I really don't like what happens here. And in fact, I get messed up because the syntax, again, syntax is sentence structure, is choppy and inconsistent. Okay, I don't know if you noticed that, but I've been reading this poem for years, and I consistently mess up that part, even though I try to kind of capture a little bit of the turbulence I think that happens there. The syntax is choppy and inconsistent, and just quite frankly a little bit difficult to read as opposed to what's up there at the top. So hopefully you can see, even at this first stage where we're getting at least one like and one dislike, you notice that there are, some things that we're probably noticing that the poet intended. Okay, let me go back over here. Yeah, so now you're saying I like the repetition of the word strikes in line 9. Okay, so some repetition there. And so we could say some repetition is a nice feature. Also, by the way, we start getting into some structural things too. Strikes, any form of repetition, whether it's just repetition of the word or phrase or clause. We can also see that like alliteration is a form of repetition, assonance, those types of things as well. Okay, very good. So, we'll take a look at this. I think the next step, if you look at the how to read a poem, is we are moving on to meaning. And meaning is unfamiliar word or phrase along with dictionary definition. I think it would definitely make sense to look up those plants. I'll tell you what they are actually here in a second, but that's worth doing. You won't be able to do that at the exam, but maybe an educated guess. Figurative language, allusion, imagery, irony. I'm also going to point of view. Point of view. I'm going to do that at language. Sorry, never mind. Okay, let's take a look at this again. And so what do I want to say about this? This is, large showy leaves. This is a plant that has large showy leaves and zinnias. Those are flowers. Look this up, so I'm going to just put this in here. Again, I won't be able to do this on the test, but might as well do it while we're here. Flowers that have a solitary head and are brightly colored. I think one of the things that I'm kind of taking away from this, I wouldn't go as far as to say that this is necessarily a symbol, but I do feel like there's a delicate aspect to this. I don't know if you pick up on that the imagery that's being shared up here, at least, is some sort of delicate imagery, which really highlights some of the violence. I mean, it really offsets some of the violence there. So I don't know, I'm going to just put that down as the imagery is actually kind of conveying something meaning-wise. I may or may not be able to use that, but I do think that there are some major contrasts that are happening here. I want to go all the way down to the bottom, and actually one of the other things you can look for is allusions. I don't think that there's a lot of similes, metaphors, that type of thing in here. I don't think it's a huge part of this poem, but I'm going to go way out there, and I'm going to just throw this out here. You guys decide if I'm crazy or not, but allusions are usually to the big ones, I think, in Western civilization are kind of the Bible, mythology, Shakespeare. Let me see what do you think of this? The woman, a tree, hiding. Does that remind you of any story that you might have heard at some point in your encounters with literature? Either the Bible, mythology, or Shakespeare are the big ones. Let me go back over to the chat room, see if anyone has this. Okay. Valentina is saying, could the increased use of punctuation be in contrast to the lines 9 through 16 be considered as the use of syntax make the tone of the poem go from agitated and violent to a more calm one? Yes, absolutely. You're getting the right idea there. Absolutely, Valentina. That is the kind of that's the kind of connection they want you to make. Okay, any thoughts? The woman, a tree, hiding. Okay, you're going to know that I kind of go a little bit out on a limb, no pun intended here with the tree, but I think it might be a little bit of an allusion to Eve. Tiny bit. You guys feel me with that? That Eve, she was a woman, there was a tree, and then when she ate of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, she, along with Adam, hid. And so you don't need to necessarily see that. If that goes over your head, that's totally fine. I don't even know if I want to write a paragraph about that. But that is one of the things that you can possibly notice. Is Hayden likening this woman, who is not very sympathetic? I mean, we don't really like her, I think, earlier in the poem. Is he likening her to this fallen woman who is suffering, who is experiencing suffering now? We are all fallen. We are all, in a certain sense, cursed by this existence. And I don't know, it might be kind of interesting to pursue. Now, hidings is a very interesting word. And one of the things you can do too is denotations. So first of all, hiding is, like hide and go seek hiding. It is concealing. Okay. So conceal the things that she has had to conceal, concealings. Okay, things that she has to kind of hide within herself, probably her own maybe history of abuse, something like that. But also hiding, I don't know if you know the word or the phrase, I'm going to tan your hide. It definitely calls to mind also kind of beating. And these are denotative meanings. See, if you go to the dictionary, these are actually definitions that you can find as opposed to connotations, which are overtones of meaning. Poets love that type of stuff. They love words that radiate out in many different directions. Okay, so we'll just leave it at that. There are some interesting things that we've noticed with that. Okay, let me come over here. Adam and Eve. Yeah, that's what I was thinking, Wayne. Okay, let's go back to our how to read a poem in structure and language. And we already have a little bit of a sense of this. We're going to look at structure, look at a couple things there. We're going to look at language. I do these two together. And I like to get at least one structure, at least one language, but ideally at least, two, because sometimes it changes. And we're looking for a complex response. Okay, so let's kind of look at this a little bit. I think we kind of mentioned this in the beginning that we do have consistent construction up here. So that is a syntax. Let's see, you're not even seeing that. Syntax related thing. That is the sentence structure, which is calm. It's not to say that he's happy about this, but he's at least sort of calm and collected. So that consistent construction kind of conveys what do you think? Kind of like he's kind of objective at this point. Maybe annoyed, but for the most part, he's kind of got it all together at this point. He's just laying it out for us, and it's across the way. Something happens though. As we get a little bit further, notice, by the way, these are called end-stopped lines. We have a lot of end-stopped lines, which are actually have kind of a natural place to stop, or actually have punctuation at the end. Let me see if I can squeeze one in here. This is called end-stopped lines, which also shows kind of calm. Maybe a little bit clipped, maybe a little bit annoyed, but not out of control. What we have here, starting in line 9 and continuing down quite a ways, is what's known as enjambed lines. Comes from the French, meaning, this means legs. It literally means to straddle, okay, but it's called enjambment or enjambed lines. And what does that do? Well, he is not in control anymore. Do you notice that he loses control of the form of the poem? You know, the poem has kind of a nice balanced form, consistent form. As he gets told back into his memories, his own memories, by the way, he is talking, my head gripped in bony vise of knees, the writhing struggle to wrench free, the blows, the fear, worse than blows that hateful words could bring. Do you feel that? That awkward, and yet it's so appropriate. So there is some trauma that is being expressed here as he is no longer able to maintain the consistency of that construction. Now, I want to point out one other thing. Now, remember, language, we can look at a lot of different things. I would say one thing, the language is pretty simple. You know, it's monosyllabic words. You know, as we get into this kind of more complicated area, we maybe have more polysyllabic words, multiple syllable words. But I would say one of the more interesting things about this poem is the point of view. This is, and I'm gonna use my little word bubble, this is third person. We're talking about them, right? And actually, if we don't know anything about the emotions of the people involved, you know, we might see them, you know, stressed or yelling or whatever. But if we don't see inside their minds and thoughts, that's called third person objective, which actually goes really well with this objective tone down here. What happens in line 13? My head. And so there is a shift to first person. My head, the face that I no longer knew or loved. Well, it is over now. It is over. And the boy sobs in his room. I want to also mention this. Who was this that mentioned the repetition? It is over now. It is over. She strikes and strikes. Repetition is another thing that can kind of convey trauma. You know, if it's okay, it's okay, it's okay. A lot of times when we repeat ourselves, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to calm ourselves down. Not to say that's the only use of repetition, but it is one use of repetition. Okay. And the boy, who's the boy at this point? Is it the original boy, or is it him as a boy, you know, experiencing his own abuse? Okay, so there's a lot of weird things that are happening there. The syntax is choppy. Okay, we can actually use that as a structural thing here. And then let's take a look at what happens. It goes back to third person. This is a really complex response. As you can see, we're going to get a lot of evidence for a complex response. I would say this is no longer third person objective. How does he know that she's exhausted? Maybe you can see that. Purged, can you see that? I mean, that actually is almost like a spiritual reality. Avenged, you know, maybe you can infer that just by looking at her. But I almost feel like this is third person limited, like we're seeing a little bit inside of her. And so what has happened? We've gone from third person objective, where we're not very sympathetic to her, first person, where we're really experiencing this as a memory, as firsthand, some personal trauma. And then we kind of understand her a little bit down here, that there's a softening of the tone that occurs. Now, by the way, the mood and tone, you know, we may be able to put some of that in here, but we've also already kind of done that. Let's just focus on the mood, or the tone, really. Sort of annoyed, sort of objective here at the beginning. I think this is traumatized is a tone. And then, you know, maybe we could even say somewhat more sympathetic, possibly, you know, or empathetic, possibly. Okay. So hopefully that helps. Let me go back over and see if you guys have any thoughts on this. Okay. We're getting to about the 45-minute mark, and I want to kind of like get close here pretty soon. Feel free to throw any questions my way. What we did here, hopefully you can see all the things that we looked at. We have tried to account for what does that show his complex response as he's witnessing this whipping. And hopefully you have a lot of good ideas there that it does. And there are a number of things that are actually contributing to our understanding that. Okay, let's go back over to our slideshow. I'm just going to finish up here. I am going to share with you right now a model response, and it's by me. Okay, so it's actually all typed out. And here is the URL. I'm going to leave that up there for a second. If you want to snap a picture of it, I'll also post it in a second. It's all typed up. Now, you're not going to type it up, and it's way fancier than it will be when you actually get on the exam. Okay, it's in MLA formatting. It has like a hook. You're not going to have a hook. You're probably just going to state the thesis, maybe do a little bit of stuff up here. Here's the thesis. Here's what I would like you to do. If you want to do a little practice with this, we're going to talk about this probably next week. I think I want to move into how do you write the timed writing. Bottom line is you just turn that prompt right around. You should mention the techniques and you should mention the meaning. Every thesis, every topic sentence should mention those two things. Remember, those are always in every prompt. And let's just look at another one. I'll help you out here with the first one. My first topic sentence, my first paragraph is going to be how the variation of syntax reflects the speaker's, I'm not going to use complex response again. I'm going to say speaker's dynamic response as he observes the woman whipping the boy. I'm going to keep on saying that over and over again in different ways. And at the very least, I'd like you to go to all my topic sentences and see if you can see my making mention of the prompt in my thesis, topic sentences, and in my restatement of the thesis. And I'm going to give you another little clue all the way throughout all my paragraphs. Pretty much I'm continually keeping those threads going. Okay, so there you go. Once again, post that to the stream. Let me see, is there another slide? Yeah, so just remember, see if you can find me mentioning how does the poet use poetic techniques to convey meaning. Okay, it's been great talking to you. Thank you again for being here on Tuesday after we had kind of the technical difficulties on Monday. Hope to see you again on Monday. Let's go for Monday and 8 to 9. And remember, follow us on YouTube, follow us on Facebook, and I'll stick around here a little bit if you guys want to talk a little bit in the chat about what we talked about, but I'm pretty much done. Thank you very much. Let me turn this off. You're welcome. Have a great week, everyone. And here's the link. I'm going to post this right now if you didn't get it. There it is. Do we have to use quotes from the poem? Yes. With this, you will have this right in front of you. Absolutely should be able to incorporate poem quotes smoothly. That isn't a bad topic to maybe do at some point if you guys are interested in, talking about incorporating quotes. You'll see that actually in what I've given you, the way to do that. I've done a variety of different types of quotes: introductory phrase with comma, introductory clause with colon, or just incorporating it into the flow of my own sentence. But it's good to have a variety of methods that you can use to incorporate stuff from the actual poem. Any other questions that you guys have? You love a session on multiple choice, Lena? Okay. Yep, we can do that. What's kind of like, what do you want to know about that? I mean, we definitely want to get familiar with the types of questions. That's one thing that I like to go over, I think, a little bit with my own students. You're welcome. I mean, we could talk a little bit about strategy with multiple choice for sure. Honestly, just practicing close readings is a huge part of it. Just getting general strategies. Yeah, we can definitely talk about that, kind of like just honestly gaming the test a little bit and improving our chances of getting the right answer. We can talk about that for sure. I think it's also really good to get familiar with the types of questions that they ask all the time. So they have very common kind of short list of types of questions that they use that we can definitely get better at doing. So yeah, we could definitely do that. Maybe I'll look at doing that next week. I kind of want to get a little bit of momentum with the poetry prompt. I don't know if that was helpful to you, where we want to maybe start looking at some different literary and poetic devices that we can potentially use. Okay, guys, I'm going to end the broadcast. Have a great week, and we'll see you next Monday.